Hello family, welcome back to History Edge. I'm so happy to have you here again. As we dive into today's story, feel relaxed and let's talk about Julius Caesar. This is not just the story of a man who conquered the world. This is the story of what the world does to men who try to own it. If this kind of history shakes something awake in you, hit that like button and subscribe. We tell these stories the way they deserve to be told.
Rome was not a gentle city to be born into. In 100 BC, when Gaius Julius Caesar first drew breath, the Subura district of Rome rang with the cries of fishmongers, the clatter of cartwheels over stone, and the distant thunder of political arguments that could end in exile or execution.
So socialist of haste.
The Subura was the kind of place where ambition was either crushed beneath poverty or sharpened into something dangerous. Caesar was born into a patrician family, noble in name, modest in fortune, and from his very first years, that contradiction between blood and circumstance would carve the man he was destined, or NTE, become. His family claimed divine ancestry. The Julian clan traced their lineage to Aeneas, son of the goddess Venus herself. It was a claim most Romans raised an eyebrow at. But Caesar never stopped believing it, or at least never stopped using it. There is a difference between faith and politics, and Caesar understood that difference better than any priest. From boyhood, he carried that mythological weight not as a burden but as a shield. If you are descended from gods, what mortal obstacle can truly stop you? When Caesar was a teenager, Rome fell into civil war. The general Lucius Cornelius Sulla marched his legions through the city gates, something no Roman general was supposed to do, and turned the republic, into a dictatorship soaked in blood. Proscription lists were nailed to forum walls. Names on those lists meant death. Caesar's uncle by marriage was the great General Marius, Sulla's sworn enemy. Caesar was 16, barely a man, and already the shadow of someone else's war had fallen across his name. Sulla saw in young Caesar something unsettling. He reportedly told his advisors, "Beware that boy. There are many Mariuses in him." Sulla demanded that Caesar divorce his wife Cornelia, daughter of a political enemy. Caesar refused. It was an act of almost suicidal defiance from a teenager against the most powerful man in Rome. Sulla stripped Caesar of his priesthood, his wife's dowry, and his inheritance in a single decree. Caesar fled into the hills, hunted, hiding in the dark, sleeping in ditches while malaria crept into his bones. Friends and family pleaded with Sulla on his behalf. The dictator finally relented, but his warning was dark. "Oh, very well. But know that the one you seek to save will one day destroy the aristocracy you and I both seek to preserve." Years later, while sailing to Rhodes to study rhetoric, Caesar was captured by Cilician pirates in the Aegean Sea. The pirates demanded a ransom of 20 talents of silver. Caesar laughed. He told them they clearly did not know who they were holding, and insisted they demand 50. He lived among the pirates for 38 days, writing poetry, exercising on the deck, and playfully threatening to return and crucify every one of them. The pirates thought he was joking. He was not. The moment the ransom was paid and he was released, Caesar raised a naval force, hunted down every pirate ship, recovered his ransom, and crucified them all. He was not yet 30 years old. Rome rewarded boldness, and Caesar understood the game. He returned to the city, threw himself into law, won cases that made enemies in high places, and charmed the crowds in the forum with a voice like warm bronze. He spent money he did not have on public games, bribing voters with spectacle. He borrowed from rich men who believed in his potential chief, among them the enormously wealthy Marcus Crassus. Caesar understood something fundamental about Rome. Power was not inherited, it was performed, and he would give Rome a performance it would never forget. Cornelia died young, while Caesar was still climbing. He delivered her funeral oration publicly, weeping without shame, which startled even his enemies. Roman men of his class were not supposed to display grief that nakedly, but Caesar always knew when a human moment could become a political one. He loved Cornelia genuinely, historians believe, and her death left a quiet wound he carried even beneath his later conquests. Years after she was gone, he would still speak her name to his most trusted friends in the small hours of the night. In 60 BC, three men looked at Rome's crumbling republic and made a private agreement that would fracture history. Caesar, the ambitious politician; Pompey, the celebrated military hero; Crassus, the wealthiest man in the known world. No written contract, no formal ceremony, just three powerful men standing in a room, understanding that together they could move the world. Historians call it the first triumvirate. It was less an alliance than a controlled explosion built to detonate the moment one of them grew too large. When Caesar was appointed governor of Gaul in 58 BC, his critics thought it a graceful exile, far from Rome, far from power. They did not understand what Caesar intended to do with it. Over the next 8 years, he led his legions across the Rhine into Britain, through forests that Roman boots had never touched. He fought 70 battles and won 60. He personally commanded charges on horseback. He slept in the field with his men. He dictated letters while riding. The wars in Gaul were savage by ancient estimates. Over 1 million Gauls were killed and another 1 million enslaved. Caesar recorded it in his own words with chilling precision, as if cataloguing a harvest. His legionaries loved him with a ferocity that went beyond duty. He knew their names, he ate their food, he called them comrades in public and meant it. When the Nervii tribe nearly destroyed his 12th legion in a surprise ambush, Caesar personally grabbed a shield from a wounded soldier and stood in the front line until the tide turned. He was not performing courage, he simply did not know how to stand anywhere else. That quality being there, in the blood and smoke with the men, made him something Rome had rarely seen, a general who was also a soldier. The greatest test of Caesar's Gallic campaigns was the Arverni chieftain Vercingetorix Afieso, a man of genuine brilliance who united the fractured tribes of Gaul against Rome. In 52 BC, Caesar besieged the hilltop fortress of Alesia. Vercingetorix had 80,000 men inside. Caesar built a ring of fortifications around the city, and then, when a Gallic relief army of 250,000 arrived, built another ring facing outward. He trapped himself between two armies. The battle was a nightmare of arrows, fire, starvation, and desperation. Caesar won. Vercingetorix surrendered in full armor, rode out on horseback, laid his weapons at Caesar's feet, and was sent to Rome in chains. 6 years later, he would be strangled in a Roman prison. In 49 BC, Caesar's enemies in Rome, led by Pompey and the Senate, issued an ultimatum: disband your army or be declared a public enemy. Caesar stood at the banks of the Rubicon River, the legal boundary beyond which no Roman general could march with armed troops. His officers stood around him in silence. He paced. He stared at the dark water. Then he said in Greek, a language of tragedy and philosophy, the die is cast. He stepped across. The world held its breath. What followed was not merely war, but the collapse of a world order. Pompey fled Rome. The Senate scattered. Caesar marched south with terrifying speed, city after city opening its gates before him like flowers turning toward the sun. He was almost shockingly merciful. He released prisoners, pardoned enemies, restored property. It was mercy with calculation behind it. Every man he spared became either an ally or a man too ashamed to fight him again. Pompey retreated to Greece, gathered his forces, and faced Caesar at the Battle of Pharsalus in 48 BC. Caesar's legions were outnumbered nearly 2 to 1. He won in a single afternoon. Pompey escaped to Egypt, where he believed the young pharaoh Ptolemy XIII would offer refuge. Instead, as his boat neared the shore, Egyptian servants rowed out to meet him. They smiled. They helped him step from his vessel, and then they stabbed him to death on the beach while his wife watched from the ship, screaming his name at the grey Egyptian sky. When Caesar arrived in Egypt days later, pursuing Pompey, he received the general's severed head as a gift. Caesar reportedly turned away and wept not from grief alone, but from something more complicated. Pompey had been his son-in-law once. A rival, yes, but also a man he had shared wine and ambitions with. The tears were real. Then Cleopatra came. She was 21, exiled from her own throne, and she had herself smuggled into Caesar's chambers, rolled inside a carpet or linen sack, depending on who you believe. What emerged when that bundle unrolled was not merely a beautiful woman, but one of the most politically brilliant minds of the ancient world. Successes. Caesar was 52. He was captivated in a way that alarmed even his closest allies. Their relationship was not a simple romance. It was a convergence of two enormous intellects who happened to also desire each other. Cleopatra spoke 9 languages. She was the first Ptolemaic ruler to bother learning Egyptian. She wanted Rome's power to secure her throne. Caesar wanted Egypt's grain to feed his wars. Between those two hungers, something genuine grew: a son, Caesarion, born in 47 BC, though Caesar never formally acknowledged the boy in Roman law. He stayed in Egypt for months longer than the war required. His enemies in Rome whispered that the conqueror had himself been conquered. By 44 BC, Caesar had accumulated titles no Roman had ever held simultaneously: dictator, commander-in-chief, father of the fatherland. And then the Senate, or enough of it, gave him the title that would seal his fate: dictator perpetuo, dictator in perpetuity, permanent, forever. The word hung over Rome like a storm cloud. The Republic, that ancient fiction Rome told itself about shared governance, was breathing its last breaths, and everyone could hear the rattle. At the Lupercalia festival in February of 44 BC, Caesar's co-consul Mark Antony offered him a golden crown before the Roman crowd 3 times. 3 times Caesar pushed it away. The crowd roared approval each time he refused, but men like Cassius, watching from the edges, teeth clenched, did not see a man nobly rejecting kingship. They saw an actor testing the crowd. They saw a king pretending to be a citizen, and they began in whispered meetings and behind closed doors to sharpen their knives. Marcus Junius Brutus was the man the conspiracy needed most, not for his courage, though he had it, but for his name. Brutus was the descendant of the man who had driven Rome's last king into exile 5 centuries before. If Brutus stood among the assassins, it would lend the murder the weight of history. Cassius worked on him for months. Brutus was Caesar's friend. Caesar trusted him. Caesar had pardoned him after Pharsalus, even though Brutus had fought for Pompey. The betrayal would need to be total to be meaningful. Cassius understood that. So did Brutus, finally, when he agreed. March 15th, 44 BC began with omens. The soothsayer Spurina had warned Caesar weeks earlier to beware the Ides of March. His wife Calpurnia had dreamed of his blooded body and begged him, weeping, not to leave the house. Caesar nearly stayed. He sent word to the Senate that he was unwell. Then Decimus Brutus, one of the conspirators, and also a trusted friend, arrived at his door and persuaded him that it would look weak, even cowardly, to cancel. Caesar dressed in his toga. He walked out into the Roman morning. He passed Spurina in the street and said, almost playfully, "The Ides of March have come." Spurina replied, "Aye, Caesar, but not yet gone." The Theatre of Pompey was being used for Senate business, while the Curia was under repair. The irony was grotesque. Caesar would die in a building bearing the name of the man he had once called his greatest rival. The senators rose as he entered and took his seat. Then one man, Tullius Cimber, approached, ostensibly to beg Caesar for the return of his exiled brother. As Caesar refused and pushed his hand away, Simba grabbed the collar of Caesar's toga and pulled it from his shoulder. It was the signal. When Caesar saw Brutus among the assassins, he stopped fighting. He pulled his toga over his face, as if refusing to be seen in his final undignified moments, and he fell at the base of a statue of Pompey, which ran red with his blood. What he said in his last breath, if he said anything, has been debated for 2,000 years. Shakespeare gave him et tu, Brute. The Latin historian Suetonius records that Caesar may have said nothing at all. Others suggest he spoke in Greek to Brutus. You too, child, whether it was accusation, disbelief, or heartbreak, no one will ever know for certain. The stone floor was cold. The room fell silent. When Caesar saw Brutus among the assassins, he stopped fighting. He pulled his toga over his face, as if refusing to be seen in his final undignified moments, and he fell at the base of a statue of Pompey, which ran red with his blood. What he said in his last breath, if he said anything, has been debated for 2,000 years. Shakespeare gave him et tu, Brute. The Latin historian Suetonius records that Caesar may have said nothing at all. Others suggest he spoke in Greek to Brutus. You too, child, whether it was accusation, disbelief, or heartbreak, no one will ever know for certain. The stone floor was cold. The room fell silent. Brutus and Cassius expected Rome to erupt in celebration. They walked into the forum waving their bloody daggers, expecting to be received as liberators. The crowd stared. Then the crowd ran. The conspirators had killed the man, but failed entirely to kill what the man had built. There was no plan for what came after, no new constitution, no restored republic. Only a body on a Senate floor and a city holding its breath. 3 days later, Mark Antony stood before Caesar's body in the forum and delivered a funeral oration that turned the crowd into a mob. He read Caesar's will aloud. Every Roman citizen was to receive 75 drachmas. He had left his private gardens to the public. Antony unfolded Caesar's blood-soaked toga and held it up, pointing to each tear, each stain. He did not call for revenge. He did not need to. The crowd called for it themselves. The conspirators fled Rome before nightfall. Caesar had no legitimate son, but he had a great-nephew, a quiet, sickly 18-year-old studying military science in Apollonia when the news of the assassination reached him. His name was Gaius Octavius. Caesar's will had named him as heir and adopted son. Almost everyone dismissed him. Antony called him the boy. Cicero thought he could be used and discarded. What none of them understood was that this pale, careful young man was about to inherit an empire and build it into something Caesar had only dreamed of. History would call him Augustus. Caesar's actual list of achievements staggers the imagination when laid out plainly. He reformed the Roman calendar. The Julian calendar he created was used for 16 centuries. Thintofel, and our modern calendar descends from it directly. He extended Roman citizenship to peoples across the provinces, the Provincials. He rebuilt Corinth and Carthage. He wrote Commentarii de Bello Gallico, one of the most precisely observed works of military history ever composed. Draws of hundreds date, still read in Latin classes 2,000 years later. He restructured Rome's debt laws, reformed its grain distribution, reduced Senate corruption. He did in 4 years as dictator what centuries of the Republic had failed to accomplish. Rome never truly recovered from the Ides of March. The Republic that Brutus thought he was saving dissolved into 17 more years of civil war armies crashing across the Mediterranean, from Philippi to Actium. Cicero was hunted down on a country road and beheaded, his hands nailed to the Senate door because they had signed the orders for others' deaths. Cassius and Brutus both died at Philippi by their own hands. In the autumn of 42 BC, the Republic died with them. What rose from the blood was an empire. Julius Caesar, was declared a god by the Roman Senate after his death. Divus Julius, the divine Julius. His adopted son Augustus used that divinity like a weapon. He was the son of a god, and therefore something more than merely human. The comet that appeared in the sky after Caesar's death was called the Sidus Iulium Caesar's star, and the Roman people took it as proof that his soul had ascended. The myth outgrew the man so completely that for 2,000 years after his death, the word Caesar would simply mean ruler. The German Kaiser, the Russian Tsar, the Arabic Caesar. One man's name became the synonym for supreme power in a dozen civilizations that had never seen Rome. Stand in Rome today, near the ruins of the old Forum, and there is a small altar on the spot where Caesar's body was burned. Sightseers, tourists leave flowers there still, roses mostly, sometimes coins, no one tells them to. They just feel the pull of something ancient and unresolved, the way you might feel standing at the edge of a dark river on a winter morning. Svizitsa, looking at the far bank, wondering what it cost the man who first crossed it. Julius Caesar was brilliant and ruthless, merciful and calculating, loved and feared in equal measure. He did not set out to destroy the Republic. He set out to save it in his own image, by his own rules, through his own blood and genius. Whether that makes him a hero or a tyrant depends on where you were standing in 44 BC, on whether your name was on his list or his. A marble remembers, the flowers keep coming, and the river flows on.